Warning. This game contains content that might not be suitable for most audiences. Viewers' discretion is advised. I never liked crowds. Always avoided them when I could. Being with a few people was fine, but being in a large crowd full of strangers made me feel that I want to recede into myself. I used to draw a lot when I was in a crowd. I had a notebook and a pencil with me when I was in school or public areas. Sketching helped me pretend I wasn't uncomfortably close to a large number of people. Eventually, I got into an art school, hoping that my years of doodles would be put to good use. I didn't expect I would eventually be thrust back into a crowd again. I had been in the school for over a year, and today, many of the students were chosen to participate in an exhibition in the city's art museum. The exhibition was held with hopes to gain the interest and financial support of rich investors, and so the students had to present their best works for it. The art students had to submit a painting. The music students had to put on a recital. Basically, anything to show what you learned at the academy. Usually I like art museums, but not today. Not when I had to mingle with a crowd of overly dressed strangers who seemed to view our pieces as inferior. Some of my friends from the art schools were here, but it didn't help much. I stayed at the corner of the room, near some empty seats where there were less people, hoping and praying that no stranger would come over and try to start a conversation with me. I was never good at small talk with unfamiliar people. My art piece is there among the rest of the students. The one of a man standing in the ocean with the dark stormy cloud above. My name was under the painting. It was Lionel. It almost feels like it doesn't belong there. So plain and sad. I just could not find the right inspiration for it. I had no muse. The time limit and the anxiety of it being displayed here did not help. The more I looked at the painting, the more I hated it. I need to get out of this hall. The voices are deafening. There's too much movement. I moved stealthily to the large doors, dodging around people, and slipped into the quiet hallways. Well, snazzy little place we got here. The sounds of voices and footsteps faded away quickly, almost too quickly. But in mine, I was free. I could think clearly now. I began to make my way down the hall at a slow but steady pace. The air was cool and felt nice after the heat from the crowd, but after a while I noticed a rather stale smell in the air, like the smell of a building that's been left empty for a long time. The sound of fluorescent lighting above suddenly grew louder. Maybe it's because there was no one around. The paintings and sculptures on display looked unfamiliar, or perhaps this was an old wing of the art museum I've never been to despite my frequent visit. The carpet and wallpaper did seem to be on the older side. I heard something. A voice. Song. Someone was singing, the voice echoing eerily down the corridor. It was a beautiful voice, deep and rich. They sang a song that sounded like a distant memory, something familiar but from a time that no longer existed. I suddenly noticed that I'd been completely still, gazing in the direction of where the voice seemed to be coming from. I had been standing stiff, arms rigidly raised slightly in a defensive pose. It was as if I was transfixed by the unusual voice. How long have I been standing here? The voice seems to be getting closer. A figure materialized down the hallway, hazy in the darkness. I could not make any details aside from this person being very tall. A pang of fear shot through me. I cannot leave. The voice grew steadily louder, the song more wild. I didn't want to leave. I could only watch as the figure drew closer. Hey, Lionel! Oh, I told you Lionel was fine. The familiar voices seemed to unstiffen my body. I turned around. Almost instantly, the voices stopped. It didn't just fade away, but rather cut off like a radio being turned off or unplugged. Yo! My closest friend, Estelle, was making her way down the corridor, holding up her dress a little so it wouldn't drag on the carpet and running as fast as her heels would allow her to. Seeing her felt like a wave of relief. However, the relief was cut short at the sight of Salvador. He stood further down the corridor, arms folded and with a grimace on his face. I instinctively returned his disgusted expression. Lionel, Please, don't run off like that again. I got worried when I couldn't find you back at the exhibition. I went around asking everyone where you went. She spoke in her usual quick, excited way, but there was a frantic look in her eyes as she clasped her hands dramatically. 2 students just left the exhibition without telling anyone, and no one could find them anywhere. I was so worried when you were in the hall too. Those 2 probably ran off to make out somewhere in the museum or something. I don't get why people are so worried. Sal spoke in a low, frustrated voice. Also, MC, don't think I'm here willingly. Estelle dragged me out here to look for you. I saw you leaving the hall, which, you know, we've been told not to leave when the exhibition is on, so you're lucky I didn't tell the professors. I told her I saw you. Then she demanded I go with her to find you. I didn't demand to drag you, Sal. You agreed to look for MC with me. My name's Lionel, fam. Like heck, I know I'm the main character here, but please. What? I did not. You told me you visit this museum often, so you knew your way around, and that you knew which way MC liked to visit, and a full-blown argument was brewing. Estelle seemed to be keeping her dignity, but Sal's face was growing slightly red. Look, are we done here? We should just go back to the hall. I'm pretty sure it's almost time for the recital. We have a few songs to perform, and you better not blow out your voice before it. Ah, the recital. Yeah, okay. Come on, MC. You promised you would listen to me sing, right? You can stand near the doors if you feel uncomfortable with so many people around and just listen. I'll come see you when the recital is over and we can find a nice quiet place to just sit and talk, okay? I nodded with a grateful smile. It was a blessing to have such an understanding friend like Estelle. We've been friends for years. Even though she was far more extroverted than I was, we got along well, able to cater to our different interests. There were times where I did wonder if it was alright if we could be something more. I did wonder what it would be like to spend our lives together. But I didn't dare to ask her. I was happy with our friendship, and after some mulling over it, felt that it would be best to wait for her to return to feelings so it wouldn't be so awkward. I'm going back to take care of my baby. Better make sure it's all tuned up for the recital. Do you really still call your violin a baby? I could not help saying. Yeah, because it is. It's my most prized possession. And I'm leaving now. Better come back to the hall before anyone misses you. Or don't. I don't care. With that spiel, Sal turned on his heels and strolled back to the recital hall. I suddenly noticed that the corridor around me looked familiar again. The carpets were the same carpets and wallpaper I've seen throughout this area of the museum. The paintings were the ones I passed by many times during my visits. There was no longer the musty smell or the loud fluorescent lights. I didn't have time to wonder about it. Estelle was already ushering me back to the hall, holding me by one arm, excitedly talking about what we could get for dinner that night once the event was over. The recital went smoothly. I stood at one of the doors of the hall, away from the crowds, listening and gazing at the stage. Estelle sang with the rest of the strangers. I could pick out her lovely voice from the rest of the voices. She could not get its coveted solo parts of the medley, which she had expressed disappointment in. But as it was, she seemed happy to be able to sing to an audience. Her eyes shone, and the subtle smile on her face made the song sound even happier to me. Singing was a joy in life, and it was pleasant to see her enjoying herself on the stage. Sal was with the rest of the orchestra, playing on his precious violin. I could just see him from where I stood. He sat among other violinists, not standing out at all. Even though we had not been on good terms for many years, I couldn't help admiring his passion for music. He seemed almost lost in his playing, eyes transfixed on the conductor with a small smile on his face. It wasn't his usual infuriating, smug smile, but a serene, joyful one, like he was happy to be where he belonged. Eventually, the medley ended. I was expecting an eruption of applause, but the crowd was only generous enough to give a moderately loud, almost dainty-sounding ovation. This was really a tough crowd to please. Perhaps feeling that as students were below their refined taste, or maybe most of them were still holding down champagne glasses in their hands and didn't want to put them down. It was now time for refreshments to be served. As tempting as the food and drinks provided was, I felt too sick in the stomach to weave my way through the crowd so that I could reach the tables. Not only because of the crowd, but also because the next event schedule would be presenting our paintings. And I was not looking forward to being paraded in front of the crowd with my measly-looking painting, especially a crowd with such a superiority in artistic taste. After some hesitation, I once again slipped out through the doors and to the hallway beyond. I was only planning to stay in the corridor outside of the exhibition wing, Maybe sit on a bench nearby and wait for Estelle. However, something immediately caught my ear. Singing. The same voice from before, and it was much nearer. Seemed to be coming from right around the corner. Curious and also rather irritated that I was so frightened of a mere voice, I decided to confront the mysterious singer. I strode over and rounded the corner in a sharp turn. I ran face first into someone I've never met before. Hello there, handsome. The singing stopped instantly, and he let out a small yelp as something clattered to the floor. I took a step back, surprised by this unexpected meeting. The man gazed back at me. He was so tall that I had to raise my head just to look at his face. In a quick second, I took in his appearance. White, formal suit, gold accessories including a pair of gold-rimmed glasses with shaded glass, long black hair with streaks of white in it. His clothing seemed to imply that he was here to watch the recital as well, looking like one of the rich, well-dressed investors. However, the way that he presented his attire was strange, with his suit and shirt being mostly unbuttoned, his jacket hanging off his right shoulder, and his hair looking a bit wild. I mean, I know someone who dresses exactly like this, like being honest. I could not pinpoint what it was exactly, but there seemed to be something very off about him. My apologies. His voice was as deep and mellifluous as his singing voice, even when he was simply apologizing. His voice felt pleasant to the ears. He knelt down and reached out to some objects with his left hand. I suddenly noticed that I caused him to drop a box of paint and brushes after running into him. Oh, I'm sorry. I knelt down and began to pick up the scattered paints and brushes. In a minute, we managed to put everything back into his box, which he shut with a click. I'm sorry for running into you like that. I stammered awkwardly. I was still not good at talking to strangers. There's no need to apologize. It was simply an accident, was it not? He grinned at me as he spoke. Yeah, and you're singing. I felt annoyed at myself for being so awkward and unable to get a full sentence out. Huh? Ah, yes. You have any qualms about my singing? No, I was just wondering. Heard you singing earlier, somewhere else in a museum. I was just, well, try and find you. I couldn't find the words to fully express what I wanted to ask him. Oh. He beamed, his face brightening up with a look of joy and satisfaction. I am delighted that you were so drawn to my singing that you wished to search for me. If you are questioning why I was singing, I was hired at the very last second as a replacement singer for one who could not make it to this exhibition. I was simply practicing when you heard me. Well, I'm Lionel, and you don't need to practice alone down an empty, dark hallway. The other singers were all practicing in a separate room. My friend Estelle was there practicing earlier. I can take you there if you'd like. Yeah, that is true. I appreciate concern greatly, but it is simply that I do not like crowds much and have a preference for seclusion and silence. I much rather practice alone. It was my turn to brighten up. Same. I don't like crowds either. That's why I'm here. Such a coincidence. Perhaps I could take you away from the crowd for a bit. I've been searching for a muse for an art piece I wish to paint after all. Alright, he was carrying a box of paints and brushes. Very good quality ones from what I saw scattered on the floor. Oh, thought you were a singer. Indeed I am, but I possess skills in painting too. I adore any form of art, any genre of creation, and have some capability in each of them. I can't imagine this guy like being a bit of a rival to Aaron from Art Without Blood. I'm just saying. Singing, painting, sketching, sculpting, playing instruments, writing, acting. I couldn't tell if he was bragging or not, especially with his odd, slightly arrogant way of speaking. However, his confidence and his deep, soothing voice made me believe every word he said. However, before each art piece can be made, I require a muse, an inspiration, something that will spark within me an idea to create. Yeah, I can relate to that. I sighed, thinking about my painting back in the hall and many failed art pieces I've made over the years. And you, my dear, shall be an excellent muse. I've been looking down for most of the conversation as I did not like making eye contact. However, This made me jerk my head back up to look at him with pure surprise. What? It was at that moment where I finally locked eyes with him and noticed how strange his eyes were. It took you this long, fam? How did I not notice his bright golden eyes and black sclera before? How did you not notice? I gazed at him, my eyes transfixed on him, both from the surprise and from his unearthly yet ethereal eyes. I wish to create a painting inspired by you. I do hope that it's alright, and that you will agree. Why me? I mean, I'm not particularly attractive or interesting. The man's expression softened. You are beautiful. Perhaps you do not see that yourself, but in my eyes, you have quite a charm, a deep allure. You have inspired me greatly when I gazed upon you. Please, will you be willing to be my muse? Several feelings were stirred up in me from his words. I was flattered, but also in disbelief. However, I also felt a deep sense of fear, although I couldn't pinpoint exactly what's making me nervous. Well, I've always wanted to inspire people with my art, I guess, like a lot of artists do. This wasn't exactly what I had in mind, since you haven't seen my art yet. But I have. Yours is the painting of a man standing in the waves by the sea. It is absolutely gorgeous, and the way you painted the sea, it reminds me of a far lovelier time. I felt my cheeks growing red. I mean, thank you? Thank you so much. I think it's hard. It's not as good as everyone else's, but I really appreciate it, especially coming from like a sweet talking demon like you. God damn, what else can you do with that mouth of yours? I guess, yeah. If you want to use me as an inspiration, I could help out. Excellent. The man was overjoyed, raising his deep voice much louder than before, and immediately turning around in a single motion. He hurriedly started walking down the hallway while he still spoke. Come along now. I have a canvas ready in another room. Wait, I promised to wait for a cell. Please, do not concern yourself for her for now. Or your other friend, Salvador, either. We must get to painting this instant while the inspiration is fresh. He isn't my friend, but... screw it! Hey, wait up! I was now running down the hall after him. He was so tall, and each stride he took was almost twice the distance I could cover in one step. I don't even know you yet! We just met and... Yes. I have to introduce myself. How terribly rude of me. He spoke with the same calmness as he did before, despite him moving so quickly down the corridors. My name is Zacharias Mnemosyne. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Mnemosyne, as in the Greek goddess of memory. I spoke hurriedly between quick breaths as I was barely able to keep up with him. He turned to me and grinned, showing his strangely sharp teeth, while still keeping up his rapid pace. Of course. You used to have a fascination with Greek mythology during your adolescence, yes. You had quite the collection of books on Greek mythology. I'm quite delighted that you are so well learned in such matters. How did you know that? Before I could finish my question, Zacharias came to a sudden stop, and I almost ran face first into him again. He held me steady with one hand before I could fall over. His touch surprisingly gentle. He then turned and opened an old door made of dark, heavy wood. As he did, I once again noticed that we were in a section of the art museum that seemed wholly unfamiliar. The carpet and the wallpaper were unusual. I don't recall the museum having such large old doors. The stale smell was back, and I could once again hear the buzzing of electric lights above me. He ushered me into the room, leaving the door slightly ajar behind us, which I was silently relieved that he did. The room was large, with a lovely carpeting and wallpaper, but it was bare. I turned to him in confusion. He simply raised his hand and snapped his finger. Ooh! So instantly, several objects materialized in the room. The center of the room now had a canvas on a stand, a small table beside it, and a comfortable armchair opposite to the canvas. I stood frozen, completely dumbfounded. Zacharias motioned for me to sit on the armchair, which I did with some hesitation, and even then I still sat and stared at him in confusion. He took his place in front of the canvas, setting down his box on the table beside the canvas, which I noticed already had paints, brushes, pencils, a cloth, and a glass of clean water. It seemed that it was already fully prepared for this moment. Like he was ready for me? Ooh. Oh god. I could feel faint alarm bells going off in my head. But for some foolish reason, I did not try to get away. I was still startled by his ability to make things appear from thin air. Aside from that, it felt as if the moment he began speaking to me, my mind was in a slight haze. First of all, I like to make some sketches. Zacharias replaced the canvas with a large sketch pad, propping it up to the stand and picking up a pencil. Sketches? Of me? Yes, but also sketches that are inspired by you. You see, it is not just one's appearance that can act as a muse for art, but rather one's experiences, what one has seen and felt throughout one's life. I don't really get it. Well, say that if you were to create a painting according to a specific theme, you would create something different from other artists who were given the same task. Your style and what you place upon your canvas would be inspired by your own experiences, which would be vastly different from the other artists. Yes. I see what you mean. Zacharias had begun sketching. He sketched with his left hand, still keeping his right arm beneath his jacket. My dear Muse, I do hope it is alright to call you that. I draw from such experiences to create my art. One's memories, one's past, is an excellent source of inspiration. With your knowledge of Greek mythology, you should know the relation between the goddess Mnemosyne and the 9 muses. Yeah, she was their mother, right? Correct. Art and the creation of art requires memory, both your own and memories of others. You create based on what you've learned, as well as what you or other people around you have experienced. Memories are something I value a lot, something I hold on to, something I wish to witness more of. What exactly do you mean by the last bit? Zacharias let out a small laugh. This was the first time I heard him laugh, and it was almost as lovely and musical as his singing. Oh, my muse, worry not about that. Simply rest on the armchair and allow me to complete my work. I didn't know how to respond. Zacharias began to hum as he drew. Now and then he would lean out from behind the stand to peek at me. Every time he did, I noticed how he had a soft, tender smile. He had a look of pure joy, almost bliss as he worked. But now and then his smile curved a little more, and his eyes were full of longing. His loving expression became that of desire, almost hunger. At this point, I should have stood up and left. I should have made a silly excuse to get out of the room, back to the hall, which felt far safer despite the crowd. But no, I simply sat on the couch, listening to his humming silently, almost as if in a daze. I didn't know how long I stayed in that armchair. At some point, Zacharias didn't seem to matter to me at that moment. My muse, have I ever told you how beautiful you are? He suddenly said. He sounded a little dreamy, sighing as he spoke. You did. I muttered my answer without much thought. How would you feel about becoming my muse for much longer? I'm capable of far more than simply art pieces. There are many more things I can create. I wish for you to be a part of them. I didn't reply. Will you stay just for a bit longer? I can provide you with anything you desire. It would be a pleasant stay. I've been alone for a dreadfully long time, and it does get rather lonely. Suddenly, Zacharias' entire body stiffened, his left arm rigidly to the side, causing him to make a stray stroke of paint across his canvas and knock over the glass on the table. It fell to the ground and broke into a few pieces. The noise made me sit up, blinking like I had just awoken from a daydream. Zacharias was completely still. He faced away from me, and while I could only see a part of his face, his expression looked uncomfortably dark. He seemed to be listening to something. So I did too. And I heard, for a brief second, what sounded like a distant, very muffled shriek. Oh goodness, I seem to have knocked over some paint water. Zacharias' expression had snapped me back from his usual cheerful grin, so quickly that I wondered if I had only imagined his dark expression. Excuse me, my muse. I must remove the glass shards and obtain a new glass. No need to help me. He said quickly as I made a motion to stand up. Please, remain seated. I shall only be gone for a minute or so. He bent down to carefully pick up the broken glass and head towards the door. Before he left, he turned and said to me, with a far lower voice than he had ever used before, "Remain seated." Yeah, sure. The reply left my lips before I even thought about it. After he did, I did obediently stay in the chair for a bit, staring off into space. A few minutes passed before I began to wonder how I got here in the first place. It felt almost difficult to retrieve my memories, even recent ones, although I did notice that the haze in my mind was beginning to clear up slightly ever since Zacharias left and I no longer heard his voice. I was able to think a bit clearer. I tried to remember how I came here, followed him down a corridor which looked different from the rest of the art museum. Alright, I was at the art museum. I was here for an exhibition and my friend Estelle was here too. Estelle! I promised to meet her after a recital and yet I was here, staying for who knows how long in a room with a complete stranger who wanted to paint me for some reason. I had to go find her and tell Zacharias that I had to leave. Although I had an uncomfortable sensation at the back of my mind that he might not be happy about it. I got up from the armchair. As I did, I happened to glance at the canvas on the stand. A sudden pang of curiosity struck me. Even though I knew I had to look for Estelle, my fascination for art got the better of me. I wanted to see what Zacharias had drawn. I walked over to the canvas. On it was an unfinished portrait of myself, marred by a stray stroke of paint he made. It was uncannily lifelike, and also beautiful even though it was incomplete and lacked shading or lighting. I admired his careful brushstrokes and how exact the proportions were. I then flipped open the sketchbook he left on the table. There were sketches of me. Many sketches. Far too many of him to have drawn in the time of sitting here. Sketches of me doing things around my home. Sketches of me out eating food I enjoyed. Sketches of me in class. Sketches of me sleeping in bed. There were even sketches of my childhood home, and all of them were perfect replications of my appearance in those locations. I slammed the book shut, feeling disturbed. I had to get out of here. Silently, I made my way to the door and looked out. The corridor still looked unfamiliar. I almost swore it changed a little from before. I don't recall it being this long or dark. Suddenly, I heard two voices in the distance, Estelle and Salvador. I had to warn them about Zacharias. To be continued. But anyway, that was Be My Muse. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be back with more Be My Muse as soon as the full version of the game is released. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to play this game for yourself, link to the game will be in the description below. And as a fun fact, by the way, the creator of this game is actually from the very same country I'm in. So like, I'm actually really glad to be able to like support someone who's actually from around here. I don't really get to do this often. But anyway, I really hope you guys have a lovely rest of the day. And I will be seeing you in the next video. This is Lionel, signing off. Ciao.